Hello, my name is Joy Riggs, and I'm the author of Crackerjack Bands and Hometown Boosters, the story of a Minnesota music man. My book came out in July of 2019, published by Noden Press Minneapolis, and it's actually about to have its first birthday. So, in honor of that exciting achievement, I am going to read to you from the beginning of Chapter 1, which is called Origins. Also, I will note I'm reading from my back porch, so ignore the squirrels. It all began during a family birthday party in October 2006 for my youngest child, Elias. He had turned 6, and we gathered in the living room of our 1920s bungalow-style home in Northfield, Minnesota, to celebrate with ice cream and homemade angel food cake. I had finished my cake and was half listening to my dad and half keeping an eye on the boisterous activities of my 3 kids and their cousins, when Dad's turn of phrase jolted me to attention. My dad was a music man for a time. He organized bands for Holton, the instrument company, Dad said. He sat across the room from me, with his back to the fireplace. He was talking to my husband's middle sister, Beth. Dad's calm baritone voice continued. Then he got a job directing the high school band in Farmington. This would have been in the 1930s. That's where he met my mother. She played in the flute section. And his dad, my grandfather, was a music man too. Beth's ears perked up at the mention of Farmington, a town 15 miles to the north. It's where she taught high school English. From the way Dad's words hung in the air, I sensed he was not done with his story. I suspected, from nearly 4 decades of experience and the thoughtful look in his blue eyes, that he was just getting started. Dad grew up in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and his circuitous style of storytelling requires patience from the listener. I'm not sure if it's a Swedish Lutheran trait, a geographical influence, or simply a dad thing, but he'll refer to people and places he assumes you're familiar with, like the supper club in Ferreda, and 10 minutes later he'll make a joke that assumes you retained knowledge you may not have possessed in the first place. If you've never heard of Ferreda, that's probably because it's a village in central Minnesota, about 8 miles from my hometown of Alexandria. Ferreda has 185 residents, a supper club, and a few bars. Don't worry, retaining that information is not important to this story. There is always a point to Dad's stories, though, and if you aren't a committed listener, you'll miss the joke. At that moment in the living room, I was not a committed listener. My brain was stuck on the phrase he uttered twice in reference to 2 people in my family tree. A music man, a music man. It reverberated in my head, knocking loose a kaleidoscope of memories. Me in 3rd grade, attending a community production of Meredith Willson's The Music Man that co-starred my mom's bridge club friend Bonnie as Marion. My head, I recalled, felt desperately jealous I was not on stage as Amaryllis, since I too could play the piano. Me in 6th grade, taking French horn lessons from my dad's friend Bud Christensen, who sang snippets of a World War I song to me. Oh joy, oh boy, where do we go from here? Me in high school, sweat pooling behind my ears under my pointy silver helmet and drenching the t-shirt under my woolen uniform as our marching band captured the grand prize at the Minneapolis Aquatennial Parade. Me in college, when I and other members of the Drake University Marching Band embraced the unfortunate acronym DUMB, Drake University Marching Band, and performed during halftime at a Kansas City Chiefs game. Me at my wedding, when Steve and I hired a brass quintet to play the processional since my dad was unavailable. He was too busy walking me down the aisle. Actually, my first memory of my dad, when I was about 4, involved music too. I remember him standing in front of the kitchen sink on a frigid winter evening, cleaning his trumpet with water so hot it steamed up at the windows. But none of these memories drew forth images of my paternal great-grandfather, G. Oliver Riggs. I sheepishly considered the fact that I knew little about him. He had been a band leader, and he gave his cornet to my dad, A black and white photo showed him instructing my 4-year-old dad on that very instrument. Gialver died a few years after the photo was taken. I knew more about my dad's dad, although I had no memories of time spent with him either. My grandfather Ronald taught political science and died of a heart attack 2 months before my first birthday. His name often came up when Dad told stories about growing up in St. Cloud. Ronald had once directed bands too, but the details of his career remained fuzzy in my head. As for my paternal great-grandmother, I knew almost nothing, except that she played the piano and had an unusual first name, Eily. I looked at Dad, who was no longer the tow-headed kid of that old picture, or the dark-haired young father of my early memory, but a silver-haired 67-year-old grandfather. He had progressed with his story. He was telling Beth about his latest musical adventure, playing in the St. Cloud Municipal Band that Gialver directed for 20 years. The band still gave concerts at Barden Park in Dad's old neighborhood. It had been on my bucket list to play in the band, so I asked some of the players I knew how I could do that. They said, "Come on a Monday, and you can play on a Thursday," Dad said. I'd only intended to play one concert, but... He paused for effect. I've been in the band for several months now. This was the punchline. Beth laughed. Dad laughed too. As I joined in the laughter, an insatiable journalistic curiosity bubbled to the surface of my thoughts. I wanted to learn more about the lives of my musical ancestors. I wanted to whip out a notebook and pen and pepper my dad with questions. What did it mean to be a music man back in the day? Was it like the portrayal in Meredith Willson's famous musical? What had Gialver been like as a band director? What did the G stand for anyway? But I had to attend to other details first, like refilling coffee cups and clearing plates. So it wasn't until an hour later, as my parents prepared to leave, that I revived the topic. Dad, I'd really like to learn more about Gialver. Do you have any files at home about him and his career? Unlike my mom, who preferred to travel light through life, collecting friends instead of possessions, my dad was a pack rat, a sentimental collector of memories. The double garage of their townhouse held boxes of his papers and mementos, much of it related to his 40-year career as a high school social studies teacher. So it didn't surprise me when he cracked a smile and replied, "Sure I do. My dad saved a lot of things from those years. It was always his intention to do something with it all, but he never got around to it." Having joined the St. Cloud Band, Dad was now helping it update the history section of its website with highlights from Gialver's career. The band still mentioned Gialver in its concert programs, and it still had a few members who had played for him. Dad also planned to make a scrapbook about the Gialver years for the band's 120th anniversary concert in the spring. "Well, I'd be happy to help you with that if you want any help," I said. The timing was perfect. A decade earlier, when Steve started his family practice residency in St. Paul and I became pregnant with Louisa, I had taken a break from journalism to be a mostly stay-at-home mom. Now that Elias was in kindergarten, Sebastian was in 3rd grade, and Louisa was in 5th, I wanted to rebuild my career. I was eager to sharpen my writing, researching, and interviewing skills on a good story. This seemed like a promising one, conveniently dangling from the lower branches of my family tree. 2 days later, I found a story from 2003 about the St. Cloud Municipal Band's uncertain financial future. The online St. Cloud Times article explained that the city had funded the band for years. The band received $40,000 a year to pay for a conductor, music, and stipends for band members. But this funding source was in doubt because the legislature and governor planned to drastically cut local government aid. Recreation programs, in St. Cloud's case the band, were likely targets.